I'm Marcus White, leader of Everyone is God, Britain's most visionary political party. I want to solve every problem in Britain, and I want to see everyone fulfilled. This is a podcast of hard questions. See me cross-examined. Do I have the answers? Do I really have a plan that works? Ask your questions and decide for yourself.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Everyone is God political podcast. I am Brudsy and my co-host today, Marcus White. Marcus, how are we doing today, sir?
I'm very good, Brad. How are you? It's a lovely day.
It is a lovely day. The sun is shining. And the subject today, guys, is should we be taxing the rich? We're going to be looking at our current tax system. Marcus White is going to break it down, his thoughts and policies on this. Marcus, whenever we talk about taxing the rich seem to clench and sort of get a bit uptight about these sort of matters. But let's see how Marcus does today, guys. So Marcus, let's kick straight off and get straight into this. What problems do you think we have with our current tax system in Britain?
So we have some really fundamental problems. The first one is that it's too complex. We've got something like 20 to 30 different taxes in this country. And people generally don't know how much tax they're paying because there's lots of sort of hidden taxes like VAT that people don't realize they're paying when they buy goods. Most people understand maybe how much income tax they're paying, but beyond that, they've got no idea about the other taxes. And then they don't know the cost of the public services they're getting in return for those taxes. And people get completely detached from the whole reality of, how much they're paying and what they get in return, what services cost. So that's the first thing. It's far too complicated. The second thing is our tax system isn't cost-based at all. And by that, I mean there's little correspondence between the tax you pay and what you get in return. So, Brad, you're middle class. Do you feel that the amount you pay is equivalent to the public services you get in return?
I think I put a lot. Obviously I work in the healthcare sector as well. I employ people at some level as well. I manage people in different levels. So I've got a stream of income that comes in from different places. I think I do the work that I do in terms of the community, helping people, very, less fortunate people that need help. I feel like the service that I offer in my roles, in certain job roles and stuff, more than pays for what I
Yeah.
actually, my contribution to society, let's just say.
So you see, different people in different parts of society will feel differently about how much tax they pay and what they get in return. And as we all know, people pay hugely different amounts of tax. And there's very extreme examples of this in our tax system because companies pay corporation tax and business rates in general. And they get almost nothing in return for those taxes, almost zero. So we've got this very wide range of what you pay and what you get in return. And this causes endless arguments. If you watch the news, a lot of the news is taken up with how much should we tax people and where should we spend that money. It's the fiscal debate. And, this word fiscal, for people who aren't sure what that means, fiscal just simply means taxation and spending. That's all it means. So we have this endless fiscal debate that disempowers everybody and disconnects them from that whole thing of what you pay is what you get. And then another problem that we have is tax, because it's so complicated, is extremely expensive to collect tax. And to give you some idea, estimates run up to about £30 billion every year just to collect tax. Now, that 30 billion, very roughly, is about 5 billion of costs that the government has to collect and enforce tax collection, and 25 billion in the wider economy, people paying accountants, bookkeepers, tax advisors, tax disputes, all this sort of stuff. The total cost of collecting tax every year in this country is about 30 billion. And to give you some example, there's 78,000 people work in HMRC alone, and that's just a few forms of tax that they're collecting there, not all of tax. Now, Brad, I want to give you a metaphor, okay, to try and illustrate what a complex mess our tax system is and what it does to us as a country. So, Brad, do you go to the supermarket?
I do indeed.
Okay. If you go to the supermarket and you put a sandwich, an apple, and a drink in your basket, you go to the till, what do you pay for?
Let's just say, let's put a number. Let's say I pay
No, I
three
don't mean
pound.
how, no, sorry, I don't mean how much. I mean, what items do you pay for? What is your bill?
Groceries.
Yeah, no, all right, sorry. Yeah, I know it's such a simple question, see, it's flummoxing you. And this is really interesting because you're actually making my point for me. So if you put an apple, a sandwich, and a drink into your basket, when you go to the till, you pay for an apple, a sandwich, and a drink, correct?
Yep. Yep.
Okay. This is cost, isn't it? You understand, you know, your sandwich your sandwich is £2.50, your apple
Yep.
50 pence, your drink £1.50, right? It's all cost. That's what your food costs. You pay what it costs, right? No problem. Everybody understands that. We don't have big arguments about who's paying what in the supermarket. Now, imagine this, okay? Imagine the government decided we're changing the system for supermarkets. From tomorrow, we're having a new system of how people pay for their groceries, and it works like this. The first thing is, when you go into the supermarket, all the prices on all the products will be taken off. So nobody knows what any of them cost anymore. That's number one rule. Number two rule, some people are going to pay nothing for their groceries. Some people are going to pay what their groceries cost, and some people are going to pay far more for their groceries, maybe 300-400 times more than what their groceries cost. That's the second rule. So everybody's going to pay different amounts for their groceries. Third rule, the rules that we're going to use to decide how much you pay for your groceries are so complicated that you need entire professions who are highly trained to understand those rules and decide what your sandwich is going to cost, what your apple's going to cost, and what your drink's going to cost. And when I say highly, I mean not just one type of profession, but a number of different types of professionals who train their whole life just to interpret these rules because they're so complicated. Now, imagine tomorrow we have that system in the supermarkets and everybody goes shopping. What's going to happen?
You're going to have chaos. No one's going to know what's going on.
Exactly. And you're going to have endless arguments, aren't you? Why did that guy come out of the supermarket with champagne and caviar and salmon in his basket and pay nothing? And then this person went in and bought, you know, just their normal groceries and they paid £1,000 for them. You're going to get endless arguments. You'd probably end up having fights outside the supermarket.
Yep.
Correct?
Yep.
Right. This is exactly how our tax system works. That's exactly what we do with our tax system. It's just that there's no exaggeration here.
Yep.
That's exactly what
when you explain it like that, it kind of makes people, you know, people that just, you know, let's just say people that aren't really very educated in this sort of matter in taxes, it kind of makes you think, why would you have such a complex system in place? And two, the only logical reason that most conspiracy kind of theory people would have about this is so that people can get away with rich people, poor people getting away with not paying their fair share. That's the only simple sort of answer that I could probably come up with. Why on earth would you make it so complex? Let's just have a simple system in place where everyone knows exactly you earn this, you got to pay that. Why don't we do that? That's what most people would say about this.
Well, we agree, and that is our policy, and we'll get on to that later.
Yep.
But before then, let's talk about the rich. Now, I think you had a question.
I did. What is your view on the rich, Marcus? And who's rich?
Okay. Well, look, I think this is one of the most misunderstood things in society about the rich. And I think it's very damaging and destructive to all of society because if we're to function as a society, we must understand the role that every group of people performs and the value of that role and how it fits in and makes the country work. So I am wealthier than the average, but I'm certainly not very rich. There's no way I'm very, ultra rich, nowhere near that.
Want to put a number on it?
I'm happy to put a number on it because I believe in transparency. I am just a multi-millionaire, okay? My net worth. So, I'm richer than the average, but, there's far, far richer people than me, and I'd be nowhere near the Times rich list. I'm just not in that realm at all. I have a very moderate lifestyle, but I am wealthier than the average person. Okay, now, here's some things. You see, what I want to do now is on my mission to try and help Britain. I want to help people understand the role and the reality of being the rich, okay? The role they play and the reality of it. So the first thing is the rich generally, and I'm going to give you some figures to back this up, the rich are an essential driver of the economy. The rich are your entrepreneurs, your business owners, and they drive the economy and create employment. So we need our workers, our working class people who work, and we need the people who provide employment for them. So straight away, if you don't like the rich, then forget employment. Just don't be employed, okay? So that's the first thing. They're an essential driver of the economy. I'm not saying they drive the whole thing. Of course, the working people drive the economy as well, but both parties play their crucial role in creating a healthy economy that delivers wealth to all of us. So that's the first thing the rich do. So as I said, they also, not only do they create jobs, they innovate and produce new and cheaper products. So just look, Brad, you've got a microphone in front of you. I've got a microphone. We've got headphones on. I'm wearing a shirt that was made, the fabric was made in a cotton mill. All of these, I've got a plastic button on my shirt. All of these products were invented and worked out how to be mass produced by entrepreneurs who then employed people to make it. And our whole history works like this. We wouldn't have any of this stuff and these cheap quality products without our rich and our entrepreneurs. So that's the second thing they do. They innovate and produce new goods at cheap prices. The third thing is, so just to put this in some perspective, you see, in this country now, when you talk about the rich, how many of them do you think inherit money, and how many do you think they've made it in their own lifetime out of their entrepreneurial work?
I believe that inheritance accounts for about 30% of all wealth. So I would imagine 30% of people inherit about 30% of their money, yeah.
Yeah. Estimates are something like 70 to 90% of the wealthiest in this country have made their money more or less off their own backs through setting up businesses and being entrepreneurs. So the rich in this country are self-made. Generally, they haven't been given it. They've made it through hard work and innovation, they take on huge levels of responsibility and huge levels of stress. So, they're doing an important job. And I just want to give you a really interesting figure. Let's take this to the extreme now. One of the things about the rich is that their wealth, usually, because they're business people, their wealth is contained in business assets, not private assets. Most of their wealth is in business assets. And business assets create jobs and drive the economy. So when we say, this person's worth 100 million, well, most of that will be the value of their business. And what is their business doing? It's providing jobs, it's producing goods or services that people want. So you see, that wealth's a good thing for the country. It's not like these rich people are extracting wealth from the economy. They're creating wealth for everybody. And to put this into some perspective, right, Elon Musk, richest man in the world,
yeah.
What percentage of his assets, his wealth, do you think is private assets? Like his home, cars, whatever, just things he owns privately, not his businesses? What percentage?
Knowing Elon Musk, what I know about him, he doesn't, he likes to maintain that he's the richest man in the world, but also the poorest man at the same time. You can't tax me. I don't have anything, basically. So I would probably say that I reckon you'd be lucky if he's holding 5% of his money.
So he doesn't even own a home.
Yeah.
Apparently, this is my research on AI. He doesn't own a home. He has very moderate possessions. His private assets are about 0.05% of his total wealth. So can you see all his wealth? He's invested everything into his businesses, and those businesses create massive employment and drive huge amounts of wealth into America and the world and create products we want. We buy Tesla cars, we use his satellites for communications, etc., cheaper internet in,
everywhere, worldwide.
Everywhere, exactly. So you see, what is the problem with that? You see, we need to allow, if somebody has amazing ideas and they go out and work really hard and they take on huge levels of risk, responsibility and stress, and then they become successful with their product against all the odds, because most businesses fail. So they actually create a product that's successful, and then that product has massive appeal and there's a huge market for it. So they grow their business. And then they become a big business and they provide huge amounts of employment. They pay people well. They drive the economy. They give people new products that they want, mobile phones, whatever it is, new cars, etc. What is wrong with that? I say there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I say it's essential. And it's important we understand this role that the rich play with the working people. So, the question arises, if somebody grows a successful business, what do you think you should do? If should you limit that business and say, well, look, when you hit 10 million turnover, you've got to stop trading, or you can't sell your products to the wider market or internationally? Or should you take that business away from them and give it to the state? Or should you tax them so heavily, that it drives them out of the country? Yep. You see, I say we need to allow successful businesses to grow into much bigger businesses, and therefore you need your ultra wealthy, because somebody has to own and run these very successful companies that produce goods and services that everybody wants. Do you see what I'm saying here?
Yeah, I totally understand it. It's one of these arguments. I'm normally in favor, capitalism. I'm normally in favor of the business owners, the big tech owners, people that employ a lot of people. I just think I like Donald. Like, if you look at Dubai, for instance, zero taxes. Everyone goes out there. That's where they run their business from. Their idea is, look, if we don't tax these people, we're going to get all these massive corporations coming over here, setting up shop. And what are they going to do when they get here? They're going to spend money on houses, spend money on cars. Then we can tax them that way. I understand that the rich, or we'll get to this in a second, but the rich already do contribute a massive number towards the income, especially income tax.
Exactly.
It's a massive number that the rich contribute to. I think a competitive rate is good, and something that incentivizes business owners to sort of keep expanding their businesses, keep growing, keep employing more people. Exactly. There needs to be a better package. Like, the UK needs to be a place where rich big company owners say, right, we're going to go set up shop in the UK. Precisely. They're not going to punish us for this. They're not going to take away all load of our money. Like, that makes total sense. To some people might just say, look, these people, they're turning over 500 million, whatever it is, a year. And look, the company owners, the what's the word? The directors are taking big bonuses, like, £3 million bonuses every year. People hear that, and that does get people's backs up. But these people are in positions because they've worked hard to get there. I totally understand that. My thing is probably just that we make it competitive worldwide. So, the UK is the place to be for big companies. That's a no-brainer. For me, would it even, let's go as far as saying this, let's say for something like, let's say a massive company, let's say iPhone, for instance. Let's say if we said to iPhone, right, we won't tax you a penny if you bring your companies and you employ loads. If you employ a certain amount of people, you bring it all there, you bring it all to the UK. Won't tax you a penny won't tax you a penny, and you can employ all these people. You generate a whole load of incomes. That kind of makes sense, because if we don't do it, that money's going somewhere else, and the jobs are going. Like, I don't know if iPhone would do that, because it's probably not viable. You could pay someone a lot cheaper in other countries, but I wonder whether we could sort of go down this line of thinking to get people, like, we'll pay you zero, we'll tax you 0% on your profits if you come to this country and you start up a business that employs over 10,000 people. That sounds like a really good package that generates 10,000 new jobs. Yes, the companies aren't paying taxes, but that does make sense. Bring in new jobs. We need jobs in the countries.
So
Bye.
you're anticipating our policy here, which we'll get on to. So I think it looks like we're largely agreeing with this. And I think the important thing is, it's not so much the debate is half about how do you tax the rich, but I think the really important thing is to make sure that you don't have a poor, exploited class of workers. That's the important thing. And, as long as people are paid well in their employment, I don't see why you should start trying to limit the ultra rich, because, as I've said, the ultra rich, their assets are business assets, and they're ultra rich because they're employing thousands of people, and they're pumping billions into the economy, and they're making that economy work, and they're spreading wealth for everybody. They're creating wealth for everybody, along with all the workers. Yeah. So I think, like I said, the important thing is to make sure we don't exploit people and have a poor class.
Yeah. Just quickly, Marcus, Holly, one of our regular listeners, if the rich are already paying most of the taxes, why do people keep saying that they're not paying their fair share?
Well, exactly, Holly. We're going to do the figures in a minute, so please keep listening. But I think you're absolutely right. The rich pay a huge amount of tax, and I will give you the figures.
How much do they pay, Marcus? Let's get straight into that.
Right.
How much are the rich actually paying?
Ahead. So look, the top 1% of British taxpayers contribute 30% of the total income tax of the country. Okay, the top 1%. And the top 10% of earners in the country contribute 60% of the total income tax of the country. Now, let's put this into, for example, a specific example. An average person in total, I don't know, very roughly, will be spending something like between £10,000 and £15,000 in total tax every year, okay? If let's call it £10,000, okay?
Yep.
Now, if a business owner is paying £1 million in tax a year, and there's plenty of them who are doing that, they are paying 100 times more tax than that person, paying 10,000. And of course, there are people who are paying far more than £1 million on tax a year. There'll be people in this country paying 10 million. That's 1,000 times more tax than your roughly than your average person. So, how is this a case of, the rich are being taxed? They're providing massive amounts of tax in the country.
Yep.
And just to put this in some perspective, if you do the figures, basically, if you run a company in this country and you get money out of that company, however you do it, it's going to cost you pretty much around about 55%. So every pound you take out of your company of profit, you're going to pay straight away about 55 pence out of that pound. You're only going to have 45 pence in your pocket. And like I say, if you take out £1 million, you're going to spend 550,000 on tax. So my view is we tax the rich heavily enough. That is my view. I think it's about right. I think you should tax the rich more, but I think it's about right. And like I said, of the overall tax income, they contribute far, far more than the average person.
Yeah, we spoke earlier about the days of Margaret Thatcher when taxes were as high as 83%. What do you think would happen to our rich class if we went back up to 83%? There's a lot of people that are in favour of like these really extortionate numbers, like punishing people for being successful.
Well, the thing is that we know this. You'll drive entrepreneurs out of the country. This is said all the time. And this is what people don't realize sometimes when they have these ideas, tax the rich really heavily. Well, if you drive them out of the country, you're driving all the wealth of your economy out of the country as well. And you'll have less jobs, you'll have lower paid jobs, and everybody will be poorer. It's just an economic fact. You can't get around it. If you want a healthy economy, you've got to allow your entrepreneurs to flourish in the business environment. And that means that, they're going to generate businesses. The successful ones will generate large, successful businesses. And we want that. That's a good thing for everybody. So, Brad, another issue, right, with a criticism of the rich. Yep. Tax loopholes, tax havens, offshore companies. I'm going to ask you a question, right? Do you think there are tax loopholes in this country where the rich can avoid paying tax?
I believe I've done some research on this, and there's several different methods used to sort of hide some money, let's just say.
Okay. All right. Well, I think most people believe this, and I think a lot of people believe that a lot of the ultra rich, avoid massive amounts of tax in this country. Now, I've researched all of this, and my research paints a very clear picture. All loopholes have been 100% closed down legally.
Okay.
So I want to explain what I mean by that, okay? We have laws in place in this country which mean whatever devices you use to try and avoid tax, they are all illegal. We have very broad open laws. So I'm not going to explain it very well in legal terms, but I'll try and explain the principles of the law. For example, we have a law which says if you make profit in this country, it doesn't matter what format that profit's made in. And by that, I mean whether it's done by an offshore company or a shell company or whatever you do, it doesn't make any difference. If you make profit from business activity in this country, it will be taxed at the usual rates of tax. Full stop. So, and there's other laws that are very similar, which all the loopholes have been 100% closed down legally. So if any wealthy person is trading in this country and not paying the same rate of tax as British registered companies, they are breaking the law. They're doing it illegally. Now, the only grey area is because the laws are so broad reaching that they pick up any type of device to avoid tax. They're that broad.
Yeah.
The only issue remaining is interpretation of the law. And that is the only grey area. It's not a loophole. It's just that grey area of how do you actually define these laws?
I did see a debate once about tax avoidance isn't actually breaking the law. It's not. And you might be able to explain that better. Yeah. Tax avoidance. So people that know they've got to pay tax, but they avoid it in different ways. There's some people that use offshore trust as well. These are still very popular sort of methods of hiding money and stuff.
So, look, this is exactly it. So many companies set up offshore companies in tax havens. It's irrelevant. The law doesn't care about it. If those companies are trading, they're transacting money and selling goods and manufacturing goods or whatever in this country and providing services, they're taxed. That's the law, irrespective of whether that company's offshore or onshore. They're taxed at the same rates. That is the law. So that loophole is 100% closed down. Now, there is legitimate, you could call it tax mitigation. Obviously, there are things you can do which are legal to reduce your tax liability. And that's legal. And there's nothing wrong with that. The laws are complex and people are within their rights to minimize their tax.
But people might say this is immoral because, you're saying that there's no legal way, it's illegal to hide money, but there are ways that you can be smart with your money and stuff and avoid paying. Like you hear about this all the time, millionaires paying less taxes than cleaners. Like these are very real things. If you've got the best sort of lawyer, the best sort of tax person, an accountant, they they can hide money from you. Like this is
hiding money is illegal. You see, so the again, I'd need to double check this, but I believe, the HMRC, I believe they have, you must disclose your financial records. And if you hide things, doesn't matter whether it's an offshore company or not, that is illegal. So the loopholes are completely and comprehensively closed down. I think this is a big misunderstanding amongst the public. I think the public think that wealthy people can legally avoid tax in this country by living abroad or setting up an offshore company. That is completely and utterly false. There are very, very powerful, very open-ended, broad-ranging laws that completely kill all of that. It cannot be done legally.
Yeah. And it's, we will move on slightly, but there's, Rio Ferdinand came under a lot of criticism, Manchester United football player and England football player, because his podcasts actually, it's UK based. That's his fan base. It's UK based, but he's set up his business and set up it in a way where he's in Dubai. Basically, that's his base, and he's under a lot of celebrities have come under flack from this, where they're sort of setting up abroad, trading in the UK, and I believe our government is trying to come hard on, this won't be a thing. This is why they're actually trying to move more towards a digital sort of currency, link banking, and all this sort of stuff that's going to make it nearly impossible. And people always, going off as well, people always give the rich a hard time about hiding their taxes. Everyone's doing it. Everyone, all the builders that get the odd cash job, and there's people collect a bit of money, and it's always the rich that seem to be targeted. And I'm not the rich, and I'm not defending them for that. I think there's definitely systems in place that we could put to benefit us a bit more. If you're hiring 10,000 people, over 10,000 people, boom, you are top. We need you, basically. 10,000 people, we need you. We'll give you the lowest rate tax as long as you're happy. I feel like you've just got to make it happy. I feel like when people get upset, I can't remember who, I think it was Jeff Bezos that actually said that we shouldn't be taxing NHS workers and doctors. There's no need to be taxing them. So there's loads of different arguments, but this leads to it, Marcus.
So
how should we be taxed? Go on.
Sorry, just bear with me before we do that. Can I just pick up on your point of Rio Ferdinand? So that's one of the classic scenarios. This is the whole thing of sort of intellectual property rights and digital media. So people can run a sort of tech business or a digital media business of some description from abroad, but actually be making money in Britain, like possibly Rio Ferdinand. I mean, I don't know about Rio Ferdinand, but the example you've given. Now, laws are already in place that completely deal with that, because HMRC and the government has successfully closed all this down. It doesn't matter what type of company you're running, even if it doesn't have a physical presence here. If you're making money in this country, the HMRC, the law is you will be taxed fairly on those profits. And this is the grey area. Okay, how much of that profit was generated in this country if it's done from an office abroad with digital products? There's no physical activity in this country at all. That is the grey area. How do you define how much tax they should pay? That is the only grey area. And this is where these disputes arise from, because the law can't give an exact formula for how you tax these situations. And some of them will end up in disputes. But the law itself is crystal clear, and there is no loophole. If you run a business entirely from abroad, it's completely digital, you have nobody in this country, but you're making sales in this country and making profits from people in Britain, by law, you will have to pay your fair share of tax on those profits. And that's it. So there is no loopholes anymore, even in those extreme digital cases. So, shall we move on to your
Let's
next
move on
question?
indeed. How we should be taxing the rich. What's the process
Okay.
you think it should be done?
Okay, well, my feeling is that I think our policy is very simple, okay? In fact, I think I'll just go through our whole tax policy because it will answer this question a lot quicker. So we want to do away with nearly all taxes completely. You know my supermarket metaphor.
Yep.
That is, the supermarkets is a cost-based system. You pay for the cost of the things you buy in the supermarket. If you buy a sandwich, you pay for a sandwich. If you buy an apple, you pay for an apple. That's a cost-based system. What we have in this country, and pretty much every country in the world, is a tax-based system where you have very complex rules and lots of different taxes. We have over 20 taxes in this country. So we want to do away with that entire system of tax and replace it with cost. So people pay for the cost of the public services they have. The same amount. So everybody pays the same amount for NHS because we all have NHS service available to us. I know this is going to present some questions which I'll deal with in a minute about how people would afford that. Now, the only two taxes we would retain are income tax, but at a much higher threshold. I'm thinking maybe it starts around 150,000. And inheritance tax. Why? Because without an income tax for the rich and inheritance tax, if you don't have income tax for the rich, they will just get astronomically rich and you'll get massive disparity in wealth across the country. So I think you've got to curb that, and I think most people agree with this. If you have zero tax entirely on the rich, even though they provide jobs and drive the economy, it gets out of hand. And then why would we have inheritance tax? Well, for a sort of similar reason, because I don't believe families should be able to pass huge amounts of wealth to the next generation without being taxed on that, because you just create dynasties where you have wealthy families that go from generation to generation holding assets, and just that is an easy ride. If they manage it sensibly, they just hold assets from generation and pass them on to the next generation. And that doesn't encourage people to, be entrepreneurial and create their own wealth in their life. So we believe also there should be inheritance tax. So every time you pass wealth on, a good chunk goes to the state. And you break down these dynasties. So that's the first part of our system. It's cost-based. So everybody pays for the same amount for the public services they have, proportional to what they take. So, for example, with pensions, everybody pay into their specific pension pot, and that money doesn't go anywhere else. And it's their pension pot for their life. And when they come to retirement, they get back what they invested. It's not diverted off into health or education or defence. So everything's cost-based. The second thing is, so if you have this system, it vastly simplifies the tax system. And as I said earlier, tax collection costs around about 30 billion in this country a year. And with a much reduced system, you could get that down to just a few billion a year. So all that 30 billion now can be spent on public services instead of collecting tax. So now we've got, up to 30 billion in our pocket every year to spend on public services that we were wasting on collecting tax. So that's the second part of our policy. We simplify the tax collection system. And the way you can do that is by having a single financial system where all transactions go through that system, and every transaction has to have a code with it that tells you what type of transaction it is. So is it goods? Is it services? Is it heating fuel? Is it electricity? And that will give you your tax code, and then a computer just calculates the tax bill every month that all businesses and people have to pay. It can be done automatically and costs very little. So that's the second part of our system. Now, the third part is, okay, if everybody's paying for the cost of their public services, how will the poor be able to afford that? We believe it's an absolute central part of society that you solve this problem of the poor. And there's a simple way in our view of doing that, and that is to pay much greater minimum wages. So anybody who works will earn a wage that comfortably pays all their cost of public services, and then is perfectly adequate for them to live on comfortably and meet their cost of living. And I'm thinking a minimum of, say, £20 an hour for minimum wage.
Wow.
So you see, because in our system, right, people don't understand this, right? And sorry, I need to give you some figures here. Now, roughly, Brad, if I asked you, okay, taking three groups of people in Britain, right? The poor, the sort of middle earners, and the top earners. How much tax in total, as a percentage of their income, do you think each group is paying? So poor people, what percentage of their total income are they paying in tax? Middle class, and you're very wealthy.
Probably 10. I think the top. I think maybe the most people think the poorest will probably pay about 10%. I think it's something like that, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay, you might find this a little bit surprising. So people don't understand, because our tax system's so complicated, and this is one of the problems of it. People don't understand how much tax they're paying, because we have taxes like VAT. So when you buy, most products have VAT on it, but you don't see that on your shopping bill. You don't have it on food, but most other products you do. So people don't realise they're paying VAT and how much they're paying. And there's lots of other hidden taxes, like when you buy a pint of beer. Do you know how much tax there is on that beer? Most people don't know.
I know petrol's 50%.
Okay. So this means that the poorest group of society, the lowest earners, are actually paying overall around about 42% of their income on tax.
Wow.
Guess what the middle earners are paying roughly when you put all these taxes into it?
Maybe 20, 25. I'm not sure.
They're paying about 44% roughly.
Okay.
And top earners, the very wealthy, of their entire income, they're paying about 47%. So when you actually do all the figures, all three groups of people in Britain are paying the same sort of roughly the same sort of percentage, between 42 and 47, roughly those figures. It's actually a very flat tax structure in this country when you actually work everything out. This was done by, I think it was the London School of Economics or something. There was an analysis done on this. So, but of course the rich, yes, they're paying the same sort of percentage, 47%, but it's on a massive figure. So they're contributing vastly more into the tax system. Like we said, it could be 1,000 times more than your low earners paying in tax. So what happens is in our tax system, you see everybody is pretty much paying the same amount as a percentage. They just don't realise it. And in our system, you know, like I said, we would put up minimum wage hugely, but then you're not taxing companies anymore, because all of these company taxes we would do away with. So companies pay zero tax. The only way people are taxed is when they draw money out of the company. So that, with our tax system, you're moving all those corporation tax and business rates, you're actually moving that back to people where they're already paying it, but you're making it transparent. People don't realise they're actually paying this already, these sums, when they buy the products from these companies. But we're just making it transparent. So we're making the whole thing, we're straightening it out so people see what they're paying and they know what they're getting in return. They're getting what things cost in return. They're paying for their apple and their sandwich at the cost it is.
Yeah. So this cost system, Marcus, one of the things that sort of struck me straight away, you want people to pay for the services that they use.
Exactly.
So would you be, so say like for instance someone, even if you did put the minimum wage up to £20,000, let's just say someone,
£20 an hour.
£20 an hour, sorry.
Yeah.
Let's just say someone has a massive surgery that costs £500,000.
No, sorry. Right. What I mean is, so look, the NHS, I don't have the figures in front of me, but let's say, I don't know, what is it? 300 billion a year or something it costs to run it.
Yep.
You divide that cost by the amount of people that use the NHS. That gives you a figure. It's around somewhere between £3,000 and £6,000 a year, and everybody pays that for the NHS.
Okay, so you'd be in favour of someone earning £1 million or £2 million a year paying the exact same amount of money that maybe a school teacher on minimum wage is paying. So
here's the thing. Remember what I said. So income tax would kick in, say, around about maybe 150,000.
Yeah.
So let's take your very wealthy business person, successful entrepreneur. They're making a lot of money because they had a successful idea, grew a big business. Okay, they're making a lot of money. If they keep that money in their company and keep reinvesting, they pay no tax on their profits in the company. Okay, so what do? They that money, if they keep it in the company, they reinvest, grow the business, create more jobs, pay more people good salaries, produce products even cheaper, etc. So you're maximizing your economy and wealth for everybody. But as soon as they want to take out more than 150,000 a year, they then start paying income tax.
Mm-hmm.
So they, and maybe around about this sort of 50 to 55% rate. So if they want to extract wealth from their business, they then start paying a lot of tax.
Yeah, but that sort of brings up a loophole that you've just sort of mentioned there, because let's just say companies are making millions and billions, or let's say hundreds of millions in profits every year. They know if they take the money out, they're going to get taxed on it. So if they keep that money in their company and keep reinvesting it, research, there's loads of things that they could do. They're not incentivized actually to even Elon Musk says, there's no need for him to buy anything physically. He'll just keep reinvesting using his money that he's got tied up in businesses and trusts. So isn't that kind of a loophole then, would you say?
Sorry, I don't understand how is it a loophole?
So for instance, you're Marcus White, you have a political party, your party is generating loads of money every single year. Let's just say that you decide for whatever reason that you don't want to pay your fair share of tax. You don't want to withdraw money from your company and buy physical things. So you decide to use your company, like a lot of you hear this a lot, company assets, company house, company cars. That way you get away with not paying the right taxes on it. Is that not the right? Am I
right?
Well, look,
let's talk about it within a company. Okay, so
yeah.
All right. Let's say an entrepreneur has a successful business, makes a lot of money, and then the company buys a house, a big house. Well, that company would then have to rent it out. They can't just give it, let the director live in that house for free. Do you see what I mean? These rules are already in place, and we would continue with this. There's no loophole there, because whatever assets the company purchases, it's called benefits in kind, I believe, in the tax system. You can't just say, oh, well, the company's going to buy this mansion and then, we're going to let the owner of the company live there for free. No, he has to pay a full rent on it. So do you see then?
Yeah, it's one of the ones that it's one of these sort of taxes, Marcus. We could go around the houses on it. We can go over and over and over. I think we've got a basic sort of understanding of I think from this podcast, the rich are certainly contributing to society a lot more than maybe people think. Than maybe the average person thinks without the figures. Most people don't look at figures. They're in their minds, they've got millions. Let's just take more of their money. I don't think that works as a whole, because generally people will just start not doing their business in the UK, taking jobs away. So I think we got that, Marcus, from there. Marcus, it's been a fascinating show. I think I've heard loads of different arguments. I'm still not sure about the avoidance schemes. Maybe this is one we'll have to revisit. We have a show on Monday, Marcus. And Marcus, would you like to tell us about the show?
Sure. So on Monday, we're going to do something very different. My partner and ambassador for human relations in the party, Rosie, she's just going to come over actually, and we're going to explain what we're going to do on Monday. So, do you want to put a...
Hi.
Hello there.
Hi, Brad. Hi, everyone.
So on Monday, Rosie is a spiritual channel. She can actually channel guidance from spirit through herself, and she speaks that guidance verbally, just like you're having a conversation with somebody. And this process is called channeling, and we've done it extensively. And it ties in a lot with our belief system about everyone being God and everybody being connected with God. And you can actually let God speak through you. It's something that's known about in history. It's been around for thousands of years. There's famous people who did this. When the Ten Commandments were received in the Bible is an example of this.
Yeah.
Moses, Rosie does this, and I do it very occasionally as well, but Rosie's much better at it than me. So we're going to explain all about this process on Monday, and we hope to do some channeling live for people, and they can ask questions.
Yeah, and anyone can channel.
Yeah.
anyone. But you just, so I go into a bit of a trance and then allow the energy to speak. But you can ask any question you want. Well, relevant to politics, I think, isn't it?
Well, no, it could be about anything. But
Anything.
about politics or anything.
Yeah.
It sounds fascinating. It's obviously it dives into there's a lot of people that are very quick to label people crazy and stuff like that when they see this kind of stuff, but it's something that people need to be open-minded to, because everyone in some way speaks to some sort of divine power, their belief of God. Even people that aren't religious, something goes wrong in their life. For God's sake, why did this happen? Why did that happen?
Yeah,
We all do it,
exactly.
whether we like it or not. I think when people hear channeling, it just sort of gets there. Sometimes it can get people's back up and think, oh, these people, they're a bit loopy or something like that. But it sounds fascinating, guys. And guys, you won't want to miss this show on Monday, 1 p.m. I'll be joined with the lovely Marcus White and Rosie Morel, and they will be channeling for us, guys, and this should be interesting. Marcus, Rosie, anything you want to say before we go?
No, well, we're looking forward to it, and thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you on Monday.
Yeah, see you on Monday. Have a lovely weekend. Mwah.
Thank you everyone for watching. I'm Marcus White, leader of Everyone is God, Britain's most visionary political party. Subscribe to us on YouTube or visit our website if you would like to find out more and get involved.